Among the University of Arizona's many financial concerns is the acquisition of a for-profit online school that was designed to be a guaranteed revenue source while increasing the university's student diversity. But financial and ethical concerns were reportedly evident from the start, along with efforts to cover up those concerns. And joining us now is Dave Wells, research director of the Grand Canyon Institute, which studied the online school before it was purchased by the U of A. Dave, good to see you here.
Hey, good to be here.
Let's talk about this was called Ashford University. What was Ashford, and what is it now? The U of A Global Campus. What is this thing?
It was originally a women's, I think, Catholic college in Iowa that was purchased and rebranded as Ashford eventually, and as a for-profit, and with the idea that one time they had enrollments of 80,000 students, but they were what we call a predatory element here in the institution, in the sense that they took advantage of students, they defrauded students by basically saying, well, you can get a degree here and it will enable you to get this kind of a job, but the students ended up either dropping out or they got the degree and then they find they couldn't get that job. So it's a really problematic institution.
So, okay, if that's what it was, why did the U of A buy it? Why did the U of A decide to rebrand it?
Well, it's sort of perplexing. I think they saw things like ASU Online, and which I believe ASU Online is a revenue center for ASU, and I thought they sort of thought that they could do the same thing with Ashford. But the problem, was Ashford was already facing charges in California, potentially going to lose their accreditation, potentially lose their access to the Veterans Administration funding, all kinds of things due to their practices. And so it's perplexing to me why they just sort of wiped that away and thought that they could simply put a new brand on it and everything would be like nice.
Arizona Republic did an investigation and found that there was a bit of a cover-up here, and there was a bit of trying to keep aspects of this whole deal secret. What was that all about?
Yeah, and it's not like this was like a super secret thing, because we did a report that we provided to the regents in November before they made their final decision and made public in early December of 2020. And this is mostly all public information that we were able to gather that suggested there were really systematic problems. But yeah, it's element from the Republic investigation. It's evident that administrators were going to do a PR campaign and sort of gloss over this and thought that they could somehow get wine out of a rock or something like that.
Well, yeah, and how much of a factor now is this in the nearly $200 million shortfall that we're seeing down there at the U of A?
It may not be a key factor with it, but it does show some ethical challenges within the university. Because like you mentioned, that their goal is still to make money off of this entity, which we questioned whether they would make money off of it back then. But the other thing is, they only have, of their faculty, only 6% of them are full-time. And so every full-time faculty, there are 15 part-time faculty. Almost all their classes are taught by part-time faculty. Those faculty are kept separate from U of A. And it's a very, at least before they purchased it, there's all evidence was it was a low-quality education.
I was going to say, what kind of an education can you get from those kind of dynamics?
Yeah, well, the university, the Arizona Republic investigation found, they looked at they had access to these general education classes, and they said, oh, yeah, it's all like homework and discussion boards, and only like 10% tests. And if you're a teacher, assessment is how you evaluate whether or not students are learning anything, and essentially they weren't doing that, and they were preying on essentially low-income, largely women and people of color as their students.
And what happens when these students either can't pay back the loan, can't stay in school, so something happens to those loans?
Yeah, they have a huge default rate. So we found that their default rate was 3 times the rate of ASU, and it's continued to be a really high default rate based off of information that goes back to 2020. We don't have data since the acquisition yet. But again, it's very high, and the Biden administration actually had to forgive $73 million of past loans because the students were defrauded. They were convicted of defrauding students in California and owed $21 million as a consequence of it.
U of A now says that it's had a positive financial impact this school has on the university, and that is on track to turn a profit of at least $2 or $3 million, not much, but it's a profit, here by 2025. That ring true to you?
It's possible, but we said that they needed to invest in it because only $1 of every $5 was going to pay the faculty who were teaching the classes, and that's way below what's the norm. At U of A, generally, it's over 40% of the dollars go to pay for instruction. And we were arguing that they needed to get up to 30 and hopefully up to 35%. If you're pulling it to make profits, you're not investing in that. And they're still keeping that faculty separate from the U of A's, and they're trying to keep all the numbers separate because if you put them together, it makes U of A look like a horrible institution.
So when the U of A says that they're keeping it and the future potential looks bright as opposed to where it came from, you say?
I don't believe them. So, ideally, this would just sort of go away, and they'll put it into their own online entity, which has 7,000 or 8,000 students. But it originally, when they acquired it, it had about 35,000 students. Now it's down to 23,000 students, and that could be because they're being more ethical in how they're recruiting students. But it also could mean because there's a lot more competition in the online area, and this is not really the value that they thought they had.
And last point, you mentioned this and referred to this earlier. There is competition. I mean, universities are getting into this business.
Yeah, originally it was for profit. So we've had these predatory institutions, which included the University of Phoenix here locally, and some people would argue also Grand Canyon University. But now ASU was an early public institution involved, but now lots of public institutions are all building their online brand, and it's a much more competitive environment. And U of A should have realized that in 2020 because it was already happening. That's why Ashford was not doing so well. And I don't just understand why they couldn't sort of see the tea leaves better.
Interesting. Dave Wells, Grand Canyon Institute. Good information. Thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here.